Empowerment, I think, it's tricky to define. We wonder if people already have the power. Are you giving them power? What's going on? But there's something about the ways in which people can help you tap into what's already there, your potential, your power, your ability.
Welcome to the Do You Feel Heard podcast, a production of Helping the Herd. Helping the Herd is committed to empowering individuals to liberate themselves from the patterns that keep them from creating their ideal life. If you like this podcast, visit helpingtheherd.com to find resources and personalized coaching to empower you to be your best self. Welcome, everyone, to the Do You Feel Heard podcast. Today we have our co-host Derrick with us as usual, but we have a special guest today, Patrick O'Connell. Welcome, guys.
Welcome. Thank you, Ian. Oh, great seeing you both. Great finally getting to meet you, Patrick. We've already been talking off camera, unable to even stop. I mean, just obviously some mutual interests, really shared community. Very happy to be talking with you both. And Patrick, welcome to the Do You Feel Heard podcast. How are you doing today?
Really well. It's a beautiful day. What's not to like?
Yeah, I love that. Love the gratitude. It's a wonderful attitude. All right. Well, like I said, we've been talking about many different topics to be able to launch into. But I'd love to just get to know you a little bit first, Patrick. Introduce yourself to us and to our listeners. Anything you care to share biographically about your journey into some of the topics we'll be talking about, but just about you and how you got to be here with us now.
How I ended up in this, I was always curious, spiritually curious, if you want to call it that. There's more than the five senses. I've always felt that somehow. And my career, I was a development innovation engineer for 30 years. Always had time to think about new stuff and why not try this or that. And I don't know, midlife crisis, if you want to call it that. When I was always interested in a lot of spiritual things, but then about 50, I totally got into yoga because actually through modern physics. Because I was an engineer, I love math and science and modern physics. Every time they made a discovery, they got closer and closer to we don't know. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and the Planck's constant. You can't get more fine than this. And they finally said we don't know. The Solvay conference in 1929, they had like 17 Nobel laureates, and they got together to try to understand what quantum physics meant. And when they finished the conference, they said, "We don't know, but it works." And that's 100 years ago, and they still don't much. There's some debate they know more, but not much. So anyway, yoga seemed like thousands of years ago they had the same questions, but the Madame Curies and the Einsteins then looked inside for the answers instead of now we're always looking to the outside world, the quantitative, like can you measure it? And we throw away the quantitative part. And I think that's what really attracted me to yoga and the mindfulness and spirituality is it's as much qualitative as it is quantitative.
Yeah, I love hearing that. I love hearing that bridge from physics into yoga and just from the rational, scientific, quantitative into the felt qualitative and how they're in flux. And you don't hear too many people. Most people go and parallel their lives, physics or yoga or something, or they might feel that way. But I love that you're just clearly bridging that in practice and in theory, it sounds like.
I studied with a Swami. I did a lot of my training for yoga, and then I got into to finish my story. Then I got into yoga. I trained with Baron Baptiste. He's more of a power vinyasa style, but he also was very strong about inquiry in meditation. So along the way, it's like the questions like why, what makes you happy, and all the big questions, but framed it from a more deeper, like look inside to find the answers, not like change where you're sitting or something. And then I went to Kripalu and did all my training for Ayurveda there. And I also studied with the Swami there. And he had a saying that stuck with me that I'd love to share, which is, he said, you don't have to believe, but you have to suspend your disbelief.
Oh, that's good. That's magic right there. That's the magic of it all. Suspend your disbelief. Oh, that's good.
And that's how I blend what you're saying, these two parallel paths, and they fight with each other in some ways. But if you say, you know what, I don't know, but if so many people find something interesting there, then there's a spark of something I should keep my mind open for instead of saying, there's no scientific proof, throw that out.
Curiosity. I can't tell you, it's a nice synchronicity every time Ian, how many guests have we had who start talking about curiosity organically within the first 10 minutes or so, coming on?
Oh, it definitely seems like a through line for sure. There's a lot of curious people, and I think that there's something about I don't know how you're going to empower people without curiosity. I think it's going to be difficult to reach people if you have a set way of doing things and you only have one approach and one mindset. You're not going to reach very many people, and so I think that's probably why we have that through line with all of our guests, is to be able to empower large groups of people, or a diverse group of people. You've got to be open-minded and curious about everything.
Yeah, that's right. Suspending your disbelief. Okay.
Suspend your disbelief. So I heard another one of saying, hold your beliefs lightly, which I like.
Yeah.
Like it's like, in Sanskrit, in the Yoga Sutras, it's aparigraha, is this grasping. You can do this, or you can do this. And when you do this, you have so much more space, but it also, you have to trust that whatever stays, stays, and whatever wasn't meant to stay, leaves.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Non-attachment, right there. And physically embodied for people just listening on audio. A clenched fist versus an open hand. I mean, that's what this is about. And
more energy there is in this versus that. And then
Absolutely.
who knows if you do.
Oh man, so many different ways that you can work with attachment. I love the bodily seeing of it, the clenched fist, or the way in which you can support something lightly or kind of strangle it. Really comes through.
Yeah, let's. I'd love to jump us right
Let's get
into
in.
the conversation that we were having before we recorded, which, Patrick, you were beginning to talk about unified mindset.
Mindfulness. Unified mindfulness.
Mindfulness.
Which is a mindset.
Mindfulness. Yeah. It's trying to describe it, like, we all have a human experience that's complete. It is what it is. You have it, and then it's trying to figure out. I almost picture like a closet that's just totally filled, and you can't figure out how. Like you can't find stuff because it's all kind of jumbled together. And unified mindfulness is a system where it helps separate out into like components of how you can approach your experience in a way to separate it out. Deconstruct, if you want to call it, disentangle. And it was developed by a man called Shinzen Young. I forgot what his name was before he became Shinzen, but he was on he self diagnosed, whatever you want to call it, that he was on the spectrum somewhere, and basically loved languages. He's super bright, and he loved languages, and he learned, like Chinese and especially Japanese. He learned, and he went to University of Wisconsin to study Eastern philosophy, and he was in the PhD program. And almost he got to where he needed to do his thesis, and since he knew Japanese so well, he decided to go over to Japan and study the Shingon meditation, Buddhist traditions. But the abbot there said, "I'm not going to talk to you about it. If you want to learn it, you have to go on the path to become a monk." And that's what he did. So he became all the way through to become a monk in the Shingon tradition. But because he had so much skill in language, he knew Pali and Chinese and Japanese, and he was over there, and he certainly knew English. So he ended up becoming a translator for a lot of very high-end meditation and philosophical teachers. And because of that, he got exposed, and he had this mind that loved to connect things, very scientific mind. He's very mathematical and scientific. He said, what's common among all these different traditions? Can I put a framework around all of them? That's why it's called unified mindfulness, that it's this way of looking at things. And the foundation of it, the three skills he talks about, it's concentration, sensory clarity, and equanimity are the three skills that any meditation technique contains at least one of them, and maybe more prominent than the others. But essentially, when you develop those three skills, then you can more comfortably go into a deeper meditation. But he's also very focused on practice in everyday life. It's all wonderful if you sit for 15 minutes on your cushion and then you go out into the world, and it's you can't work with that. So a lot of the training is how do we work with those three skills. They called it micro hits, but like in the everyday world, it's like, can I take a little break? And we had this conversation before we started about, like breath, and like even just take a couple breaths or something during the day, or there's all these different techniques. He has 40 different standard techniques. It's like, oh my gosh. But it's not. It really comes down to these three things. Concentration. And if you look at like a scientific definition, or like very traditional, like MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, kind of the definition of mindfulness, it's intentionally being in the present moment without judgment is kind of the essence of mindfulness. And so if you look at those three pieces of mindfulness, then intentionally being in the present moment, intention means you're concentrating to be somewhere. And I love in his technique, he has two ways, a lot of different interesting strategies. So he talks about this more in technical terms. So when you create a meditation for someone, or including yourself, it's like, what's your contact strategy? Do you want to be turning towards a problem, or do you want to be anchoring away from a problem? And each one has an effect. But sometimes the best thing you can do is, it isn't like you're ignoring the problem and you're like totally pushing it away. But it's like, for right now, for these 5 minutes, I'm going to choose to anchor away from something. So give yourself
really like
that little reset.
I've never heard that, because I was like, where are you going to go other than turn toward? Something we talk about with empowerment and on this podcast a lot. You turn toward the thing, otherwise you're running from it often. So this is an interesting, different way to think about it. Anchor away. Can you say more? But
if you turn towards, it's very powerful, and yes, you can solve it. But also, when you turn towards, sometimes you can end up rumination and perseveration, where you're just replaying and you're not adding any value to what you're working with. You're just taking that same energy and recycling it. So if you anchor away, then when you come back towards it, then maybe you come back to it, fresh. I don't know if you ever like try to solve a puzzle or something, you can't figure it out, and you leave it alone for a while, and you come back the next morning, it's like, it makes sense.
That's
absolutely. That was the analogy that came to my mind too when you were talking about anchoring away and coming back, was when you're stuck at a puzzle and you can't find any pieces that fit, rather than, I've tried to persevere in that situation, and very seldom do I really add anything new to the puzzle. If anything, I just grow my frustration and, get tired of that puzzle. But taking a break, doing something different to kind of shift your mindset and give your, find a new place to place your attention, a new focus for your attention, so that you're not thinking about the puzzle. So when you come back, it's almost like it's a whole new puzzle. Like you forgot that you had even gotten stuck, and you've got a whole new, a fresh perspective on that puzzle there. So yeah, I love that. And I think most people can resonate with that. I think most people have done a puzzle and, have had difficulty at times in that puzzle. And so I think it's a very tangible example.
Why wouldn't your life? Your life is like the ultimate puzzle, if you want to look at it that way, I guess. The challenges you have. And the other thing I'd say, that it isn't just your turning away, it's also what they really focus on, is you're developing these skills. And I've noticed it in my own life. I was an experienced meditator. I'd meditated probably like 17 or 18 years before I trained in Unified Mindfulness. But I still learned quite a bit, this idea that it's a skill you're developing, that you can choose where to focus your attention, instead of you being pulled and pushed and bouncing, you drive a car that's like, hitting every trash can and mailbox along the way. You choose to be on the road, you choose to be somewhere else. And you have that, by doing that, it gives you empowerment.
Absolutely. Empowerment. Back to that through line. Empowerment, I think, it's tricky to define. We wonder, people already have the power. Are you giving them power? What's going on? But there's something about the ways in which people can help you tap into what's already there, your potential, your power, your ability. And that's just it. Where else is that going to start than the ability to control your attention? And that is how I got into mindfulness. It just started to make sense to me. And then focusing on a single anchor, and the breath for a long time, has been valuable. But I've noticed myself looking for the next step. And that's why I'm really thankful. I've started training in Unified Mindfulness, that I'm like 3/4 of the way through the foundational course now. So this is so perfect timing, helping me kind of see what comes from it. But that's it. Developing this way to not just anchor, but then to move it around. And can you talk about how unified mindfulness, teaches that directing and orienting of attention outside of just one anchor?
That's an interesting point. They have a lot. Like I say, I mentioned they have 40 different techniques. Like, oh my gosh, like I have to learn all. And then I don't know how you felt about mindfulness, but when you get to the deeper end, everything's unified anyway. It's all one feel, and you're taking it apart just so you can help you develop these tools. So they have different contact strategies. They can be like if you're familiar with meditation techniques in general, there's almost two ends of the spectrum. One is focused attention, like you're focusing on a candle flame or a mantra. Or there's the other end of the spectrum where it's open awareness, where you let your mind just freely float. And if it touches something, it's like a cloud and it floats past, and you just stay on or a dog and the cars run by and you just stay on the porch. There's no chasing after things. Mm. So he kind of, unified mindfulness embodies that. And there's techniques, they call it, one of the techniques they call is do nothing, which is basically whenever you feel like you're trying to control the mind, you just let it stop, so that it's the open awareness. But they also have techniques they call see, hear, feel. And I'm sure you've started the training now, so you've already touched some of that.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely the first place to start, where I've been trying to describe this to people. I break it down into those. And you're right that it's much deeper than that, but it's such a easy entry point to start with three main senses, see, hear, and feel, and start noting, literally, and noticing how often you are caught in one or the other, or how your attention moves. It's something that's radical, so simple, but radical if you've never done such a thing. Radical. And just that basic, having three ways to split your attention and notice opens toward 40 or infinite, and all these different things you can notice, such as gone, when something is gone, is a really interesting one.
The training, yeah.
Oh yeah, it's really good. So, but I love what you're saying. You have to start somewhere. Almost, you have to start somewhere with working with attention. And this gives you some framework, again, that helps you and unifies a lot of different practices into something workable, especially for the Western mind, I would say. I do think it is uniquely tailored toward helping Westerners in some ways, though I do think it's universal.
I think it also leads to the next. I said there's three skills you're developing. The first one is concentration, you have they really are skills. And the more you become skilled at them, the better you... It's hard to explain, but I look at if you watch a skilled craftsman or an artist, I used to be an engineer, and people came into drywall, and when you watch somebody that's just a skilled craftsman, they did it the right consistency, the right amount, and magically they get it done, and I'm 6 layers later, and half it's on the floor. There's a skill that it looks so effortless. It's a simple thing when you do it right, but to do it right is just takes practice. But where I was headed was it goes to the next one, which is sensory clarity or clarity. Oftentimes we bundle things together, and it creates overwhelm. So I'm anxious. I remember I used to compete as an adult in figure skating, and a lot of different lives.
I do that every day. Yeah.
Yeah. But before a competition or a test session, you naturally get nervous. There's that sense of tension, and a coach really, said, you have to separate. Part of it, you're excited, you've trained hard, you want to go out and show what you've done. It's just fun to go out and show what you can do. But then you're also the nervousness, I'm going to catch my toe pick and land on my face or forget the program. All the above. But when you combine them together and you call it nervous, then it's overwhelming. And the unified mindfulness system, it's sensory clarity. It's what am I truly feeling? What is the experience? And then you can start to separate them out in individual pieces, and then each one maybe is more approachable.
Yeah. Overwhelm's one of the most common things that's come up in the training so far when I'm watching group trainings and things. And it is amazing if you start trying to label anyone at home right now. You can just start trying to label what's going on. See, hear, feel. And if you try to label them all, one of the first instructions is you don't have to label them all. If you try to, you will very likely be overwhelmed. There is so much coming in at all times from all these senses and more. And so the first step, like you're saying, is the clarity of what's even coming in and at what rate before I can decide how I want to relate to it or what I even want to do here in this, just sensorium.
Like say pain or something, it's like you call it my hip or whatever, but it's also, what am I feeling? Is it, you can start to then describe the texture of it. Is it growing? Is it localized? Is it sharp? Is it soft? Is it throbbing? And just by doing that, it starts to become less of an it and more individual things.
And what a great example of turn toward, which, can be hard to do with pain, but one of the most useful, turning toward. And that's been my takeaway so far from Unified Mindfulness. Why it's touching me has been, it creates a bridge for the thinking and doing mind to reach the senses. And so whenever I hear that about pain, something that's very easy to turn away from, how did you just describe turning toward? You use categories and use the thinking mind, getting a handle on it. Is it growing? Is it changing? You're thinking, you're analyzing, until eventually you get the permission to just feel and not have to analyze and sort anymore. It's a beautiful bridge for the thinking mind to get to the body.
So that's sensory clarity. I mean, it's way more than that, but it's just this idea, back to like the definition of mindfulness from John Kabat-Zinn, this being in the present moment. Well, when you have sensory clarity, it gives you that anchor to be in the present moment. That you're bringing information in instead of just looking at something and saying, I know what it is. You're seeing it with fresh eyes. And that's a powerful thing, to do that intentionally. Back to concentration, intentionally coming to the present moment, even for a little bit of time, back to these micro hits, like 3 or 4 times a day, to say, okay, let me just stop, truly focus on what I'm eating. Especially like eating is a really powerful way to do sensory clarity. Like I'm just not stuffing food in my face. I'm truly feeling it and chewing it. And I don't know, back to another topic someday we can talk about is Ayurveda, and with the food you eat and how that influences the body. The body has a natural wisdom, and if you just take a little time to be present with that, then you can feel the body saying, yes, this is, I'm accepting, you come in harmony with what you're eating. Maybe you make better choices the next time. Doesn't mean you shouldn't eat perfectly. I eat junk, but I want to eat junk. I enjoy the junk. How's that for a...
Yeah, something that I wanted to share that came up for me that really resonated, and I don't have the experience that Derrick has had with this course, would love to be exposed to it, but I don't have that, foundation coming into this. But one of the things that resonated that you just shared about was essentially, if I'm feeling, 3 or 4 or 5, who knows how many things, but I just classify it as overwhelm or stress or anxiety, it's easy to then just maybe not dismiss it, but kind of, oh, well, I know what to do with this. I have a pre-programmed response or a learned pattern that I do when I experience these things. And it's really similar to, I often talk about how we put each other in boxes often. So we look at like the left, right, like, oh, you're on this side, so you're this. You're automatically associated with this, and anything I associate with this, I have a approach that I do with any of those people. And so it feels very similar to that. And what I encourage is not putting people in boxes, because no one person is any set specific things that could even be put in a box. We're very complex. We're very, unique in the ways that we approach things and the ways that we look at things. And so essentially just taking that same curiosity, back to that again, is that being curious about other people instead of putting them in boxes. Similarly, don't put our own experiences into a box. Let's be curious about our experience, because maybe it's not just overwhelm or just anxiety. Maybe there's a lot more to it. And if we analyzed it a little bit more deeply, there would be something there for us, rather than dismissing.
The only thing I would add to that, though, is don't put yourself in a box either.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
which kind of leads into the next point, the third leg of the stool, which is equanimity. Is when you put somebody in a box and you label them with something, you've already then you pushed and pulled. You like equanimity. The other two are kind of, they're common words, and we kind of have a feel for what they are. Equanimity is a little more interesting, subtle. In the training, it's also very interesting because we have a lot of people from different countries. So English isn't their native language, so it even gets more interesting trying to explain equanimity to someone that English isn't their native language.
Yeah.
But then it's
That
fascinating
sounds
because
like
then
a
they have
tough
some
one.
interesting insights. Their language has a different word that actually even a nicer connotation in some ways. So it's kind of fun to kind of explore the different ways that we can say equanimity. The strict definition is, to be present without push or pull. So you're not being pushed or pulled somewhere. But it's deeper. I kind of feel it as being in harmony also.
Harmony. Union.
Then it gets into the more of the, and that's what I love about Unified Mindfulness. Then you can weave back in some of the traditions you've learned, like, call it Dharma if you want, Dharma, Karma, all the other words that kind of go into the, people discovered and thought about thousands of years ago that, equanimity in some way, truly at the deepest level to me means that you're just in harmony with what's going on around you, that you haven't prejudged it, you haven't boxed it into a little corner, you haven't, it's hard to do. Equanimity is probably it's a practice.
Yeah. A master value even, or a master skill. I've been thinking equanimity is the key. I don't know what the door is, I don't know what the lock is, but that keeps coming as I do this training and read different things and reading Shinzen's book. And it really was equanimity is the key. I haven't heard it described as harmony, so already I'm glad. I often think of it as just that non-judgment, what that really means to truly be okay with everything, to be accepting of it and not judging one thing is better than the other. Something that I, at least as a human, have to get to purely theoretically and, get there in my mind before I could even hope to develop a skill of feeling that way. Because judgments and hierarchies are just such a natural way in which my brain works and how it looks at the world in terms of utility and these labels. So it's something I had to get to theoretically, but then with these practices, you can start to experience what that feels like in the body or in your auditory field or in your visual field, and to realize like there's a way to get through some of that inherent judging, ranking, labeling. I like harmony. It does feel like you're more in harmony with the world when you're in that state. You're part of it instead of outside of it, judging, labeling, critiquing.
That's connected to another topic that we talk about often, which is nonviolent communication, which is one of their tenets is observation without evaluation. Can you observe what is happening without evaluating it or judging it or giving it a good or a bad? It just is. And from that place, we can do so much with it versus judging it.
You bring up always when you say, without push or pull and not judgment, then the next question always begs itself, and that maybe is a discussion we can have. It's like, okay, but how, if there's injustice or there's something, how do I take action but still be equanimous is an interesting discussion to have.
Oh, yeah, I'm game. That's a great one. I think we just talked about that some in the training, or there were some modules on that, so I'll kind of start off where I'm at with it. It's the way I'm understanding the difference is an equanimity of your mindset to your immediate experience is different than being equanimous or impartial to external circumstances that are unfolding over time and impact others. I think that's a pretty clear version of where I'm at with it. You can practice equanimity in each moment and accepting things just as they are, and that does not preclude you from the desire, the calling to change things and alter them in some way in future moments or in the next moment. Those are in harmony, and those actions of, initiating that can spring up in a present moment where you are perfectly fine with the present moment, including the actions you might even begin to take or the plans you begin to formulate. That can happen in equanimity without attaching to if they're successful, if they fail, with not attaching to a lot of the consequences that are possible. That's for me the bridge. That's where you're going to be equanimous but still want to change things. What do we think, guys?
You're
Conflict.
such a fundamental question. I'd love to hear what you all have to say about that. I can't say I have a perfect answer either. I have my own journey. But.
Sure. Patrick's more experienced. Ian, I want to hear yours.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that the way I understand this concept and the way that I apply it is we'll bring Ram Dass into the conversation as always. We can't not talk about Ram Dass on this podcast.
He makes frequent appearances on the podcast.
He has the most appearances than anyone on this podcast for sure. But the idea that, when he asked, Maharaji about, how can everything be perfect with all these injustices in the world? And it doesn't mean that you have to accept the injustices and, be like, yay, injustice, these terrible things are happening. It's not so much that, but it's recognizing that all things are happening as they are needing to happen. And you working toward creating peace in this world is also part of that. And so if your path is to spread love and compassion and equality in all things that you're doing, if you have the I don't know if it's a prayer, but essentially the Mahayana approach of may every action benefit all sentient beings, if that is how you're moving forward, that's going to be in direct opposition to injustices. And also you can accept the injustices as being part of this experience and continue on your path, which is, rather than battling what's happening, you just take every step forward in alignment with what you're wanting to create. And that will have the outcome that it has, which is just as perfect as everything else that's happening around you.
Ram Dass, yeah, beautifully stated. I love it. I'm glad both of you shared it, because to me it's such a big. As soon as you say equanimity, that's always the next thing. It's like, that's great, but how do I? And you both expressed pretty much my. The only things I would add a couple things. Derrick, you said, I think the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, don't be attached to the fruits of your labor, is really one of the essences of what he says. So if there's injustice, and exactly what you were saying, Ian, that you work towards, but you can't be so attached, like it has to be fixed, that you're spending your love towards it. And I love the two people that really influenced me. Ramana Maharshi is such a luminary in my mind. I don't know how familiar you are. He never really had much teachings because he was so enlightened. People would come to him and ask questions, but he never really encouraged trainings and all that stuff. He didn't start a school because, well, I'm here, come and ask me questions, and maybe I'll answer them for you. But somebody asked him, well, how do you treat others? And his answer was, there are no others. Everyone is me. There's no separation between me and the others. So the essence is, if you love yourself deeply, then the actions you take towards others will be an extension of that.
Oh, that's great. That's it's too good. There's a Bruce Lee quote in Someone Turned It Into a Song, which made it even better, that I quote often. And it's like an interview with Bruce Lee, and he's about to fight, and the interviewer says something like, how do you prepare to fight an opponent? And his answer is, there is no opponent. He goes on from there. It's perfect contraction, expansion, this non-dual kind of almost meditation he's doing before this fight. It's beautiful. But it's that simple. There is no opponent. There is no other.
Yeah, I think we can, what's coming up for me is extrapolating this idea of if you love yourself and you view everyone as yourself, it's very easy to love everyone distributively, right? But I think that there are so many instances of people who struggle to love themselves. I think that's a big point of suffering for a lot of people is, images of, or issues with their image of themselves or judgments of themselves or just all of these things that we put onto ourselves, shame and guilt. And whatever, you're not good enough, you this, that, and the other. And when you are putting that on yourself, similarly, if you're putting love into yourself, you put love into others. If you're judging yourself constantly and shaming yourself, I think the same rule applies. And I think it makes sense why that is something that is lacking in a lot of areas of our society. Is there isn't a lot of self-love, and therefore it's harder for people to get to loving others.
And that's kind of the essence of the last half of the Bhagavad Gita, at least last third, I know, is like basically bhakti. It's love, selfless love, unconditional love is the essence of what Krishna is saying to Arjuna. It's like,
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
the ultimate goal, without having to have a goal, the ultimate path, I should say.
I'm seeing, I hope we're not getting too non-dual for our listeners here. My apologies. But it's so practical. It sounds like really highfalutin and philosophical until you touch base with your sense experience or your goals in life or these things, and it becomes so relevant in the ways that we're starting to build those bridges. But one area I keep coming back to right now is labels, and how useful labels are and necessary, and how terribly divisive, truly divisive they are. And I'm not sure, how do you guys view this weird relationship? And with this, I'm thinking about labeling your experience, even as a bridge to get into it, is still narrowing it, right? The label, as you say here, you're narrowing down something, and you might, like we talked about, you can really put something in a box so quickly and stop being curious about it because you've named it almost, because you've tried to label it. And we can do this in so many scales. So how do you relate to this necessary evil, if it is necessary, if it is evil?
I can go first, Pat.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what was coming up for me as you were asking that question, Derrick, is coming back to what we started. One of the topics that we mentioned in the beginning was holding things lightly. And so if you're going to put a label or you're going to classify some aspect of your experience with this one label, it's as long as you're using it as, a way to guide through your experience to better understand your experience, I don't see that as a negative thing. But if you, again, grasp tightly onto that thing of this is my experience and this is happening and I'm done exploring, I'm done with curiosity, I've already figured it out, I don't think that's serving you to do that. And so with any label, I would say explore the label. Hold on to that label very gently and say, okay, if this is this, what else is there accompanying this? And what do I want to do with this information, rather than just, again, clinging tightly to that label as, nope, this is what happened, this is my experience. Any other new information that contradicts this, I'm going to reject that because I'm holding on to this experience and this classification of my experience. And so I think if it limits your perspective, I think it's harmful. If it helps you go deeper and explore it more, in more detail, then I think it's supportive.
That's beautiful. That holding lightly makes a lot of sense for me, and it's less about the process that we're doing, but I'm hearing you say it's more about our relationship to this process that is unfolding and likely will, barring some very intense meditation techniques for a long period of time, to get to a goal, which isn't the goal of not having thoughts or judgments necessarily, but could be a goal of your practice if you want it to be. Otherwise, you got to work with it. You got to play with it almost. I hear play in there too. Holding lightly, like play. It's not war, it's play. What's the difference? In some ways, it's how seriously you take the game.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, Patrick, what do you think?
If you allow me to go to the deep end, I'll take you some.
It's the only place we hang out normally.
Okay,
Unfortunately.
then we're there. But start off how I explain things. If you have an apple, and you really can't see what's inside. You can't see the core necessarily. All you can see is the skin, and that's in some ways our life experience. There's a deeper inner awareness, but we can't. The thinking mind really can't necessarily comprehend that because words are limiting. The words, in some ways, every word is a label to what you're saying, Ian. It's a label. Every word is a label. You've diminished what it is already. In some ways, that's why I like using Sanskrit sometimes for words like dharma and karma and all that, because it's an empty bucket that we can fill with things. We haven't already. It's an English word we've already had so much connotation with. We have an empty bucket, and we say, "Oh, here's a word that we can fill with a new concept." But so you have this apple, and you say, "I want to understand what's at the core, because that's the core of us, our deepest core." So we need to take some sort of knife and cut a slice through that to get a picture of it. But that slice we take is only a slice through it. It gives us a representation because we used whatever plane or whatever you want to call it. So say you cut an apple crossways across the apple, and when you look at the core, it looks like a star. But if you cut the apple from top to bottom, you see it looking like two crescents. And they're both true. And neither one is complete, but each one gives you an indication of something going on there. And there's a Zen koan that says, the finger pointing at the moon isn't the moon. I don't know if you've heard that one before or not.
I have. I've seen that as someone's email signature. It was a powerful email signature. It was like, you're going to give me a koan every time we send an email to each other? All right. That's one way to do it. But yeah, I heard it phrased differently though. It was the fool looks at the finger that points to the moon and thinks it's the moon. There's a different framing on it.
It's kind of the same thing. So each slice you take is like a finger pointing towards somewhere, but it isn't necessarily complete, but it's more informative than just saying, oh, I don't know. And then all you look at the skin of the apple and all you do is like you're being bounced and pulled every which way, but you haven't found the center. One of the books that influenced me when I was first getting into yoga through modern physics was called The Dancing Wooly Master. And in the preface, they were talking about, he was saying, Wooly is kind of like a martial arts-ish, but more like ceremonial, but as much as I remember. But I liked his definition. What's a master? A master is someone that teaches from the center.
Center of what?
Well, the center of what it is ever you're teaching. If you see a lot of people that really aren't that skilled, they give you lots of little formulas and how to do things. But a true master starts at the very center of it, and then here is the essence of what we're learning, and then teaches you practices and ritual, whatever on top of that. So in some ways, when we are just looking at the skin of the apple, we're really not finding the center. We haven't found our own center. So then we're always being like not grounded necessarily, that things can pull and push you as easily. So how do you find your center is the question. And that's what I mentioned. If you allow me to go into the deeper end of the pool, that's why I mentioned this Sankhya philosophy, S-A-N or S-A-M, depending which way, K-H-Y-A, Sankhya philosophy. And it underlies yoga.
Any questions first before we move on to Sankhya, Ian? Before you hit the deep end, anything of this step?
Excuse me, sir, what was that?
Oh, no, so Derrick was just asking if there was anything before we get into the depth of Samkhya. Is there anything we want to wrap up before we get there? And I had...
This is kind of like the end. This is like I'm answering the question of like, how do I find equanimity? Because
Sure.
this is to me where the deep end of the pool is in equanimity. In order to truly find to find equanimity, you can't be pulled and pushed by the outside world. You have to live in the outside world. Your mind, your manas, your mental mind, and that's where Sankhya is. They split the mind into split the self into three sections essentially. Well, split, but non-dual. It's not really split. It's just a way to explain it. You have the Atman, which your essence is like this cup of the divine that's given to you for this lifetime. Your soul, whatever you want to call it, spirit, your soul. And then you have this awareness of your separateness from the full universe, which is ahamkara, which is the self. And then you have the mind, which is one interacting with the world and all the senses. So what happens, and why that's how I did a long explanation for why I feel equanimity. If you're always in your mind and you're exploring your senses, then you're always being pulled and pushed. And that's where meditation and mindfulness come in. That if you, your consciousness, your awareness, back to this, you can choose where to focus the concentration. Instead of focusing on the outside world, what you do is you allow that to kind of float a little bit. and then you feel the self, which is given to you for this lifetime. And when you're there, then you can start to maybe turn towards something deeper, this unchangeable, if you want to call it the soul, that basically only reflects what's in front of it. It doesn't shift. It's part of the universal consciousness. That's the deep end of the pool, but I bring that up because to answer your question, and then to go back to what we're doing, that to me is the essence of how I find equanimity, is that I realize that the mind is just part of who I am, and the mind is valuable and has to solve problems and keep me safe and help others, but to take that little bit of time to say, okay, that's the mind, but there's a self that's individual for this lifetime, and kind of what you're explaining earlier, Ian, like from Ram Dass, hey, we're here, these are opportunities to, to share and to love. We're given this lifetime to do that. But then what is it that makes us, what's the essence of us is this deeper thing, and it's beyond words, because back to labels, you can't label what it is, and if you try to label it, you have to kind of, Nisargadatta, I don't know if you know him, Nisargadatta Maharshi, he was another very enlightened being. And again, you didn't hear much about him because he didn't teach much. He just was there because people would ask him questions. And he mentioned, like, there's this truth with a capital T, or an experience, like there's something that's true, that's fundamentally true, that's not just intellectually true. And it has to about, how do I find that? And his answer was, well, you can't, because you can't use your mind to find it. And they say, that's great, but how do I do that? And he says, what you can do is see what's false. You can see what's false and you say, that's not me, that's not essential nature. And then you can kind of let go of holding on to that aparagraha, kind of weave together what we've been talking about this whole time. You hold, I have this belief. It's like, maybe that belief, it's a false, there's something in that's false, and maybe I can let that slip through my fingers. And then the more false you let go, it's kind of like Michelangelo when he creates a statue and he has a block of marble, he's taking away everything that isn't what he wanted to have the final product. Does that make sense? That's the deep end of the pool.
No, it definitely makes sense. That reminds me of this concept of answering the question, who am I? And you strip away all the things that you're not. So you're not your name. That's just the sounds that people make to refer to your present body. You're not your thoughts. You're not your feelings. You're not your past experiences. You just start stripping away all the things you're not, and then eventually you're left with, whatever you happen to find when you strip all those things away. And that's how you find who you are, is by discerning who you're not. And so it sounds very similar to that kind of a concept.
Yeah. And Alan Watts talks about it too. Alan Watts has a take on this that sounds very similar. I'm trying to see if I have it right. He was talking about apophatic and cataphatic language. And I forget which one's which, but I think apophatic is like negative language and referring to things in the negative, what's not there. And cataphatic would be whenever you're seeing in positive language, what is there. And he said God is only there in the negative, can only be reached through apophatic language. He said you can only describe God, and this is why there's you can't make depictions of gods in some religions and things like that, or the word or the name isn't allowed to be there because it's a recognition, it's being carried out in activity that we cannot describe what this thing is. We can only describe what it's not and talk around it. So I'm hearing that same through line of this what you can do with your own mind is the same practice he uses for getting to God, of what is it not, what is it not, what is it not.
I think the only thing that Sankhya adds to that, well, there's way more that comes with it, but I think people oftentimes, when they let things go, and then there's nothing there, and that's kind of an unpleasant. So if you picture that these three levels, you have the Atman, which your inner true self, and it truly is luminous. I mean, in my own experience, that there's something to go. Even you have to let go of the outside world, that aparagraha, but then instead of being nothing, there's nothing here. Back to Michelangelo, when he lets all that stuff go, there's this beautiful statue underneath, this beautiful self, the soul that's there, that truly you can experience directly, but you can't find it in words necessarily. I think that helps me anyway. And use the word God, Ishvara Pranadhana, in Sanskrit, that's another subject to, long conversation on that. But
Yeah, deep into the pool. No, thank you. I really this this mindset, the framework has not been presented to me before. I'm meditating with this. I'm over here taking notes, but I do just because time is relatively real in this universe. I do want to kind of switch over to hearing more about how you bring breathwork or breathing practices and even your research into this landscape. But first, anything else you guys want to, throw into this side of the pool before I swim us over to the other side? Anything?
Nope, I'm good.
no,
It's been great. Yeah, tell
kind
me
enough
more.
to let me digress into deep, crazy stuff. But breath.
You were holding our breath the whole time. That was good. Yeah, tell me about what you do with breath.
Breath is, in your lifetime, you take like 600 million breaths. Do you know that? 600 to 800 million breaths is what you take. And if you think about breath, when you inhale, the evolutionary, when you're bringing in the outside world, so it's like food, danger, mates, all those things. So every time you inhale, and this is very clearly scientific proven, this isn't just fluff, this is very clearly scientifically proven that your brain, you have the two autonomic nervous systems, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The sympathetic is that action, active, your brain becomes brighter. And the parasympathetic, your brain becomes more relaxed. So every time you inhale, your sympathetic nervous system becomes more active, which totally makes sense because your brain is saying, what's out there? What do I need to worry about? What do I need to be pulled towards? So for every inhale, your brain becomes active. And every exhale, the exact opposite happens. You have this rest and digest. So fascinating that, when you think, oh, when I breathe, breathing's breathing, but your lungs have no muscles at all. Your lungs have some elasticity, but they don't really have any muscles. So in order to breathe, you need to activate muscles to stretch the chest and pull the diaphragm down. And you can use up to 40 different muscles when you breathe. It's a lot. It's a huge amount of awareness you can have, the different ways you can breathe. And that's just from the diaphragm up. And when your diaphragm pushes down, then you're also pushing on the abdominal cavity, which is totally filled with liquid. So it pushes and squeezes and stretches all the way down to your pelvic floor, which is another long discussion to have. But so many people have pelvic floor issues because it's all the trauma and all the things that's socially unacceptable about what happens in the pelvic floor. It's an area for a lot of tension. So breath totally affects the whole body from the brain all the way down to your pelvic floor. It can be affected by your breath. So one of the most... excuse me?
Sorry, I just want to note, just for people, because I try to get this concept across a lot when I work with patients about what you're saying about the sympathetic and parasympathetic response. You would almost view it like a brake and a gas pedal, right? Somewhere really simply, you could say that breathing in is kind of like hitting your gas and breathing out is your brake. And so you can intentionally notice that and then maybe even manipulate it, which you might get into techniques to work with those to have more brake or more gas depending on what you needed. Is that right?
100%. It's right. And then the next level, which is manipulate. I think the simplest way to manipulate, and this is another fascinating thing, is that when you inhale, your diaphragm pulls down. Well, your heart sits right on top of your diaphragm, and all the space around it is expanding. So when you inhale, the heart becomes a little bigger, and the blood flow slows down, and your body has all these mechanisms that says, ooh, my blood flow is slowing down. I need to speed things up. So every time you inhale, your heart rate goes up a little bit. And then when you exhale, your heart rate goes down a little bit. They call it respiratory sinus arrhythmia. And there's a frequency, because the body has natural rhythms. There's a natural frequency at about 0.1 hertz, which equates to 5 breaths per minute for most people. So what's 5 breaths per minute? To break it down into simple terms, a normal respiration rate for most people is around 15 breaths per minute. If you do even the next step, it's 2 seconds in, 2 seconds out is a normal breath for most people. That'd be 15 breaths per minute. So if you want to find this peak of how the body has more time to respond, you want to slow the breath down to like 4 or 5 seconds in and 4 or 5 seconds out. And there's a natural resonant frequency between your heart rate, and as the heart rate changes, then also your blood pressure changes, and you have sensors in your aorta, and you have sensors up in your carotid arteries that are monitoring your blood pressure. Obviously, when your heart rate changes, your blood pressure changes too. So they call that baroreflex sensitivity. So you're long and the short, there's a harmonic frequency at about just 5 to 6 breaths per minute. Each of us is a little bit different. So if I would encourage you and your listeners, if I were to give you any simplest breathing technique there is just to take a long 4 or 5 second inhale and a long 4 or 5 second exhale. And just continue that breath. And I do that, and I kind of, my own little way, I call it the fives. Like if you take 5 breaths like that, 5 breaths of 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out, and you do that five times during the day, it's kind of like your little mini break to say, ooh, stuff's going on. So just a little practice you can take with you. Like it's 5 breaths, 5 seconds in and out, 5 times during the day. It really is powerful. It's so simple. So simple, and not, and then it's like a reset back to what we talked about, unified mindfulness, anchoring away. It's that little bit of time to anchor onto something new, just like your breath, instead of like being spun around with whatever's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm reminded of back to good old Ram Dass when he speaks about Dostoevsky, who is like, talks about how he's like, practicing the observer essentially of, Uspensky. I'm getting my Russians mixed up. It was Uspensky, and it was, okay, well, Uspensky is, opening the door, and Uspensky's closing the door, Uspensky's walking down the road, and the idea of like taking these long intentional breaths in, long intentional breaths out, like that's not something that's necessarily sustainable forever. That's not something you're going to be able to do legitimately 5 breaths in and out per minute. Like that would take a tremendous amount of focus and intention, but the more that you do that, it's like anything with practice, that muscle grows, and maybe over time you start to lengthen your breaths and you start to build a stronger practice of these slower, deeper breaths.
And just to your point, your normal respiration, your normal inhale, like when you're not thinking about it or practicing something, is about a half a liter. Like a 16-ounce soda bottle or something is a half a liter. I didn't bring it as a visual demonstration, but easily in your lungs, when you take a deep breath, you can take up to 4 liters for the average adult male. You can take up to 4 liters. So you're only using a small capacity. And even in that half a liter, if you think about like there's like this dead space of your bronchia and your trachea and all that stuff. So really you're only getting about 350 milliliters of fresh air with every breath. So if you take just a little bit bigger, say you take a liter of air instead of a half a liter of air, you've already accomplished a slower breath. And it's easy to do. It really is not that hard. As a matter of fact, it's very beneficial because in your lungs, you have these alveoli, these little teeny sacs. And when you don't breathe deeply, they tend to stick together, especially up in the upper part of your lungs. So unconsciously, whether you know it or not, every 4 or 5 minutes, you take a sigh. You take a deep inhale and you sigh, whether you realize it or not. Matter of fact, people who are on ventilators, they intentionally give them that deep push every so often to make sure the lungs stay totally inflated. So this deeper breath actually opens them back up and improves your efficiency of your breathing after you do that. So there's additional physical benefits, not even psychological benefits. So now you have this better oxygen transport.
Makes a lot of sense. That makes a whole lot of sense. And then you think about like if somebody's stressed or somebody's dealing with like high anxiety or high stress, you come back to what you were talking about with your exhales. If you have a long exhale, your heart rate goes down. And so just adding long exhales into your practice of breathing is going to bring down your heart rate, which is going to bring calmness and clarity just by extending your exhales.
100%. Yeah, that's exactly the technique. 100%.
Yeah.
Make your exhale. And matter of fact, if you ever wake up in the middle of the night, at like 2, 3 in the morning or whatever, and it's like, I can't go back to sleep. That's one of the techniques to go back to sleep, is make your exhales twice as long as your inhales.
In the physiological sigh you're talking about, the way I've heard that described about how to inflate the alveoli is take a deep breath and then sip in more air at the top. Like to basically, that's like the way I've heard it described, to like try to get to your comfort zone and then realize that you have a little more and do one more and then a long slow exhale. Is that right, or do you know another technique
No,
to do that physiological sigh?
That's even the next level of technique, yes. And as a matter of fact, there was a paper that came out last year that compared that with 5 minutes of meditation, a box breath, and a Wim Hof style breathing, and the physiological sigh. And the physiological sigh had the most positive, it influenced the positive affect and decreased anxiety more than the other three.
Wow.
And it had significant effects. So it's these, they aren't fluffy things, because if you think about it, in the survival world, they call it the rules of three. That you can live about 3 weeks without food, you can live about 3 days without water, but you can only live about 3 minutes without breath. So your brain is totally, it's like the one and only serious autonomic function that you have conscious control over. You can't control your heart rate, you can't control your blood pressure, your body temperature, but you can significantly control your respiration. So as soon as you touch your respiration, your brain is right on top of it. So back to the, like we talked about with the concentration, sensory clarity, and equanimity. Breath is a very powerful tool to help pull your concentration somewhere. And especially if you've suffered from asthma or panic attacks, and when you start to touch your breath at all, then it really kind of challenges your equanimity too, because you're like, So I'd encourage your listeners to like, be nice to yourself. Breath is very, very powerful, and it might have a lingering effect after you work with it. So back to the Bhagavad Gita, all the stuff we talked about. Don't be attached to the fruits of your labor like I'm trying to do some crazy breath work. Don't do that. I would strongly recommend be friends with your breath and truly that sensory clarity. Feel, like say there's 40 different muscles that work with your breath. So start to feel, like when I inhale, can I feel it go down to the pelvic floor and to the core? Can I feel it lift up into my heart? There's so many ways you can explore the breath that are powerful to pull you from the outside world to the inside world. In the Yoga Sutras, there's 8 limbs of the yoga, and pranayama is below the asana. It's the next level right before you get into the meditation, deeper meditation, and it's there for a reason. It's a very powerful bridge from the outside world to the inside world.
Yeah, the thing that I keep hearing, and I think the thing I want all listeners to understand, is they need to sigh more often. So if you don't sigh a lot throughout your day, just sigh, and let your partner know that it's a thing, so they're not worried that you're upset or that there's something the matter. But just sigh your way through the day, and it'll bring peace and equanimity to your life.
Derrick mentioned the physiological sigh. If you guys want to, maybe we'll do 3 together if you're up for it, just so the listeners can just get, like we talk about it, but just actually do it, so it's like you can see it. So one of the things when you breathe, if you're all like, ugh, then you can't move the breath. You have to find. One of the cues I use is like picture like the very tips of your ears are being pulled up and back just a little bit. It lengthens the center of your body, and then allow the outside of your body to soften. And then it's like just as simple as this: to take a deep inhale, not super deep, just inhale, and then inhale another breath on top of it. Open your mouth and a long exhale. Let it go. And then inhale again. Inhale more. And let it all go. And one last time, if you can, inhale through the nose. Inhale more. And let it all go.
This would be great for the ASMR people out there. They're going to love this clip.
And going to sleep with Do You Feel Heard? Oh, it's so powerful. Thank you, Patrick. And how easy to add in. You just demonstrated that it takes less than a minute. And how many people will have a story they might hear in their head. I don't have time for that. I don't have time for breath work. I'm too busy. I'm too stressed to have time for breath. It's always there. You're only using everything that's inside your body. It's such a powerful tool.
It is like you're not breathing anyway, so just consciously switch your breath, and your mind is totally on top of it, because even like we were doing the research on this, at CMU, we're doing this with the this app, and monitoring respiration as people meditate. But we had a hard time. You can't say what we're monitoring because people then automatically change their breath. As soon as you even mention breath, people start to like, how am I breathing? So it's
Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, right? Once you observe it, it changes.
As soon as you started talking about longer 5-second inhale, 5-second exhale, I just started doing. I couldn't help but focus on my breath. Or as soon as someone mentions posture, like everybody starts to like sit up straight, because like bringing the attention to it, you naturally make that shift. So I definitely resonate with, as soon as it's being talked about, I'm definitely aware of how I'm interacting with that. But I had a question for you, Patrick, if you'll allow me to divert the conversation briefly. Still on breath work, but something that I experience is I have an 8-year-old, soon to be 9-year-old, and some days that, classifying the experience as overwhelming or anxiety or stressful or whatever in his 8 or 9-year-old brain gets to him, and it gets to the point where it's like too much, and it leads to needing to like not shut down, but like stop and go inward and try to move through that experience. And I wonder if you have any recommendations for breath work, a breath work practice for maybe our parents out there who have younger children around that age, or really any age, any children who are having difficulty processing stress or overwhelm or whatever. If there are any breathwork techniques that you can recommend that they introduce to their child to help them deal with those moments with breath, to bring down the levels of anxiety and allow them to have a more centered equanimous
I know, it's a funny word, isn't it?
As it changes the syllables and the cadence of it. It depends on how you're using it. But do you have any suggestions or recommendations for kids?
As I was thinking, oh my gosh, because what we talked about is absolutely the essence of it, to get them to take the physiological sigh. But with kids, I haven't really worked with kids that much, but I can almost picture making a game out of it somehow, because I don't know if you ever read the book, I don't have it in front of me now, James Nestor has a book, Breath.
I was about to ask you about it, of course.
Yeah, it's a very popular book, but in one of the sections he talks about, back to this breath, like the harmonic, like the 5 breaths per minute, 5 to 6 breaths per minute. But it's also in chants, it's in the rosary, it's in a lot of places it shows up autonomously, because this is a natural rhythm. So my little head, and I don't know how it would work, but it'd be nice if there was a way to make a game out of it a little bit, instead of saying, just take a few breaths. I think with kids, it's a little easier if you make it more like, a rhyme or a rhythm or something or a game somehow, but to, like, I don't know, you can't probably hear in my background, but I have a clock that ticks or something that would almost give them something that makes it more real, more fun.
Yeah. I think Om Mani Padme Om also traditionally follows that same pattern. It's amazing how many places it shows up. So making it musical, a game, something that is doing along with it. So it's not just a breath, but something that necessitates breathing, like saying something or singing something. It allows you to get into that pattern.
Or maybe make it his own. Make it his own name's breath or something. So it's the Brian, whatever your son's name is, my Brian's breath. Let's do something with it. So it's his own special. Maybe create it together with him. Have that idea that it's a physiological sigh, or that's kind of my input, I guess.
I think of visualization too, and how powerful that is. Maybe having a visual that you guys see. I'll send you something. There's one about a penguin. I'm not sure if it's in the right age group for your son. I think it might be a little geared for younger, but it might still resonate. But I know there's ways in which people have tried to use children's books to teach mindfulness and to have those things. And I think there's something to that, having a character, someone demonstrate it, that is friendly and sticky will get into the kid's mind, and they'll remember this penguin that learns how to deep breathe. Then maybe they can view themselves as that. I think that's another route there too, visualization of some kind.
You bring up a good point. I actually was thinking as an adult, everyone's got a different pathway, and I'm not I've never really done guided meditations that much. It's just not been my path, but a lot of people really like imagery. And one of the images you can use, they call it the painted breath, might help. like when you picture as you're inhaling this paintbrush, it's sliding up in this beautiful smooth stroke up to the crown. And then as you exhale, and then you can picture what color it is and how smooth it is. So that's one of the techniques I learned. They call it the painted breath, where it's sometimes it gives that image of like it's just coming up, back down, and maybe have them imagine what the painted breath, and he's painting happiness, or he's painting an emotion even, or something that works for him.
Yeah. If you hiccup during that exercise, do you call it a happy accident? Well, Bob Ross for everybody. That's so helpful, and thank you. We make clips of the show, and like these are some really helpful clips. I'm hoping to get out there for people who are asking these questions. Ian, great question. What do I do with, especially with my child? And that's my follow up with you. Is I talk about this all the time, but I don't practice it for whatever reason. I talk about how we need to introduce mindfulness to children while they're developing, while they're doing this. Ian, you're very intentional with how you raise your son and the influences you bring in. And this is something I wanted to recommend, but I was going to look into it first. I now have a certified teacher in Unified Mindfulness. What do you think about the core training? If you know what I'm talking about, there was a free core training that I did before starting the foundational training, the paid, more structured course. And the core training was good, and it looked very age appropriate for anyone. It had like cartoons, but then it was still handling like, deep end topics like no self even, but it seemed pretty accessible. What do you think about the right age or the acceptable ages to introduce the see, hear, feel technique, at least the basics of unified mindfulness to a child?
Great idea. And kids love to play, so you can make it way more playful, and like you say, see, hear, feel, and it can be, gamify it in some ways. It's never too early. Kids have a natural. Yeah. But also what you're saying, that Ian, you're the second person that's asked me, but I have a son about the same age. It's like, they're going to school now, and it's like they're anxious, and what can I do? So that it's never too soon, I don't think, to introduce the tools, especially, at that age, 5 or 6, I think is really, and the kids understand it. But what I mentioned before, if you teach from the center, then if you embody it yourself, you say, here's a technique. But it is hard. Kids' attention, you have to. It's a dance.
Oh, what a great point, though. It's more they're going to pick up on how you behave and you act, and maybe even naturally or intentionally mime you, copy you. So what a good callback. We got to do it ourselves first before someone else, but we can, while doing it, while teaching from the center, also spread the technique and gamify it and make it easier. But it just like with teaching meditation, it doesn't go very well if you can tell your meditation teachers on their phone while they're trying to tell you about whatever. If they're distracted, you pick up on that nearly immediately. That's what they talk about, the transmission. So what a good reminder there. I have more questions for you. But first I had something I think. I basically want to learn more about your research and what you're researching. What's the edge of this, bubble? We already know so much. You've already taught us so much. But first, I wanted to drop this for you, possibly with any healthcare providers you work with specifically, if you work with any clinicians, and then for any clinicians listening to this, which I'll definitely be recommending. I think healthcare needs to catch up and be teaching breathwork things as a first line when someone comes in with anxiety, not which medication do you want. It's like we really skip the basics so often in medicine. I'm a primary care provider, so I will be recommending this. But I have to put this note here. Some way of getting this into your visit can seem silly sometimes, or seem like, I don't want to, what if they're not interested in meditation or whatever. It's easy for healthcare professionals trying to see everyone and make sure they don't offend anyone and that things go smoothly, or you don't open a can of worms. I think we can get in our own way. So a very easy way I've found to introduce breath work with patients, if you see patients, is when you do a lung exam. Something that we have to do at most primary care providers, a lot of different specialties. You're almost always going to check someone's lungs if you're doing a medical visit. When I do that, I always ask them about breath work, if they have anything, and I'm like, can I teach you my easiest breath work practice? And it's basically what we went over, the breathing out longer than you breathe in, or perhaps the physiological sigh. And then I'm like, while I'm listening, just practice that 4 times at your own pace. I have to listen to the lungs anyway. It doesn't slow me down much more than if I just told them to do normal deep breaths. And look at that, they get to practice it too. So dropping that out for any clinicians you work with, spread that idea, and we'll clip this and maybe send it out. I think it's really helped me to feel like I'm making a difference when I'm out there with someone who, even if I can't help them in any other way that day. I'm like, you never know when that tool, that seed is going to come back, and they're going to be stressed, and they're not going to have anything to reach for. And they just might because they practice it. It's an amazing gift. But thanks for letting me share that. I would love to hear what's your research focus on right now? What are you guys exploring, and what's the purpose?
The main grant we're working on is the Equa, which you mentioned, which is there's a lot of phone-based applications for mindfulness. But one of the challenges is, I think it's 94 and 96% of the people that start a meditation app quit within the first month. So that's a huge, meditation is when I ask people, do they meditate, it's always like a guilt trip. It's like, oh, my dog ate my cushion, or, it just isn't there. And it's hard. And Juliana Ray, which is one of the leaders of Unified Mindfulness, talked about it. That one of the challenges is it's when you're letting something go, when it's gone, you don't realize it. There was a Procter & Gamble had this product that was going to remove scents, and it was super powerful, and they introduced it to the test market. They spent a lot of money on it, and it totally failed. And then they thought about it, and what they did, they came back and they added just a little bit of fragrance to it, and then reintroduced it to the market, and it became Febreze, one of their best-selling products. Wow. But it failed originally because when there's something like tension or stress, and when you let it go, it's gone. There's a hole there that doesn't. My cat's
You could see
wants to come
like
visit.
a little shark fin. I could just see the tail coming and like you're behind your peripheral, and then
No, Patrick, no, coming at you. Look behind you, Patrick.
But anyway, so the challenge is, it's like with meditation, it's very subtle, and sometimes it takes weeks before it really starts to take effect. So people don't know how they're doing. And then the other thing is the instruction set is usually unclear, and that's where Unified Mindfulness has very clear instruction set on how to do things. They like see, hear, feel, and noting, so that helps. So the feedback, like how do I know I'm in a good space? What we're doing is we take a phone and place it against your chest with just a little chest strap. I have one here. You just put it against your chest, and then basically slip the phone in there. And your phone has an accelerometer and a gyroscope, and it records your breathing while you were doing the meditation. And then when you finish the meditation, like a 7 or 8 minute meditation, it gives you a chart showing what your respiration looked like.
Wow.
And then we're using artificial intelligence, and we're training it from all these different sessions. We ask people how they felt before the meditation, how they felt afterwards. And then from that, we're taking AI and training it to say, this person had a really significant meditation. They felt more equanimity, the 3 skills that we talked about, concentration, sensory clarity, and equanimity. And did they improve? Then we look at the respiration pattern, the AI does, and then we give them feedback like, it looks like you really had a good session this session. So we're giving them real feedback right after their meditation on how they did. And it seems to be, and that's what we're testing right now. That's what the trials are all about. But it seems to be very effective. A lot of positive feedback. Like, I actually have something I can look at when I'm done meditating that shifted.
What are you selecting for when you say it was a good session or a bad session? What are the factors that are changing here?
Well, it's the respiration pattern. And then, again, with AI, you don't necessarily know exactly what pattern it's detecting. Certainly, the main factors would be the respiration rate itself. We give them with a chart. We say how many minutes out of the 8 minutes did you spend? There's an ideal zone, like I said, it's 5 to 6 breaths per minute, but up to about 9 breaths per minute. But you can see with experienced meditators, when they meditate, their breath drops into that zone automatically, pretty much. So it's like with these are all like less experienced meditators, and how do they, trying to show them that, hey, your breath went down into this range, this lower 5 to 9 breaths per minute. But also then we're looking how many times does it go out of the range and back in, like are they coming in and out of the meditation? And then also, besides respiration rates, the respiration pattern, how smooth it is. And that's kind of what AI is looking at, the pattern. And pattern might even include ratio of inhale to exhale and all that. So we're still developing all that.
Wow. Okay, that's really interesting. And when you say the slower respiration, I think what I'm getting at is I'm almost hearing something like meditation has to make you more calm to be a good one, and that's something I don't think I completely agree with. So I'm trying to clarify: is that what we're saying with the slower respirations, or what's the relationship to a good meditation or more concentration?
An interesting question, and actually, a part of what we're doing right now, I've provided these belts, and we're testing people that are experienced meditators to see how they, their pattern. Like my initial reaction is that their respiration patterns aren't the same as meditation naive people. Your point's a good one. I mean, people have this misconception that meditation is like all, Zen and calm, and you can have interesting experiences too. Typically, most people, my experience personally, and people that I've spoken to, the respiration typically goes down most times because you're not being chased or pushed. You're kind of like go somewhere, and then if you have an experience that's maybe unpleasant or challenging, I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know. It's a whole area that we haven't really explored much, to tell you the truth.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I love. I think I don't know is the most underrated answer to a question. We could all say it so much, and it would be so good. So I appreciate speaking to your level where you're at and you're researching, you're finding out more. I love that, and it sounds like it made me think of something from Shinzen Yun in the book in the Science of Enlightenment. They talk about the relationship between relaxation and concentration, and that there actually can be a synergy, because you can think about being too relaxed to where you're not aware anymore. You can think about going to sleep eventually. I relax, I'm asleep. The opposite of being aware and awake in some ways. So he talked about, though, that there is a relationship, almost like a sweet spot of as your relaxation grows, you are able to concentrate more. You're turning off all these kind of distracting alarm bells and mental activity and physical activity maybe, so that you can focus more deeply. So that's what I'm almost maybe projecting. Maybe that's what you guys are finding or will find, is that sweet spot of relaxation and concentration, which is maybe a unified goal of mindfulness in some ways.
Yeah, you put it well, 100%. I think sometimes they call it in the zone. If you ever watch like Michael Jordan or like a top level athlete, you can tell that they're in the moment, they're relaxed, but they're also performing. So they're performers. Any of the performers, great performers, are doing the same thing.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. The breath is infinite. I could keep going on this one forever. That book, The Breath by James Nestor, recommend it to anyone, especially with the audio book, the physical book too. But I liked both. It was what you were saying, and you can't talk about this stuff and not change your breath. As I was reading or listening to that book, I've done it in both formats. I've read it like 3 times now. Each time I keep coming back to it because it's a breathing practice in and of itself. Any chapter that's about the breath, I find myself breathing at least deeper and slower, if nothing else, or taking on techniques they're talking about. So I can't recommend that enough.
Another book I'd recommend, and I can't remember the author, but the name of the book is Exhale. My memory doesn't work as well, but we can put it in your show notes or whatever, but we'll find it. We can track that down. But I like it because it talks about the science, but then it gives you like different situations, and here's a breath practice that you can try for this. Like if you want to improve your focus, if you want to really reduce your anxiety. He has like 30 or 40 different techniques. He went through a lot of different scenarios. Like, oh, here's one that I want to try that. And from my experience and my knowledge of what I've read in the science and my own personal experience, he did a good job. He did a good job of nothing crazy, like kind of push you too hard, but interesting sequences he put together.
Fantastic. Exhale. All right. I think for time we're gonna have to save Ayurveda for some other time. I don't want to give a brief dive into Ayurveda for anybody, so I really hope you consider coming back on. But for now, I'd really like to ask a final thing on how you pair breath and meditation. We've talked about meditation, we've talked about the breath. I heard from, I think it was someone on the Duncan Trussell podcast, a meditation teacher guest, I forget their name, who mentioned bookending a meditation with breathwork being one recommendation they really liked. Start and end with some kind of breathing practice to tune you in as you start and end. And I've tried to adopt that sometimes, but I've never found my optimal relationship between breathing practices, meditation practices. Any recommendations or areas to explore for me and the listeners?
Fine. Yes, your experience is exactly mine. I think it's especially if you're being more an experienced meditator, sometimes when I sit, there was a Rabbi Finkelstein had a beautiful quote that really landed with me. He said, meditation is to thought what digestion is to food. That, when you eat something, you don't know exactly how the digestive tract works, but you kind of absorb the essential nutrients that serve you, and just as important, you let go of the stuff that isn't meant for you. You're letting go of the waste. And meditation in some ways is that same thing. All the experiences around you, the nature and everything else, you bring that in, and if you don't sit quietly for a little bit and digest that, but you don't have to do it with the thinking mind. You're doing it with just like the digestion that happens inside. You really don't understand it necessarily. But if you just sit quietly and let it happen, something happens. So, long answer for your question, but I feel the same way with breath. Sometimes breath is a great thing because what you're digesting needs the breath. And other times, breath might not be the right thing, if that makes sense. Depends.
At least one. Depends on what you're going for.
Yeah, and so to answer your question, oftentimes I start with the breath. I do breath, but more of a simple breath, and not very long typically, just because. But also my own personal practice, I do. They call it Shiva Shakti breathing, where it's a long, for 25 minutes, I'll do like a long, 24-second inhale and a 24-second exhale, and that's my, feel. And because really prana, breath work, we call it pranayama, but prana is the essence, not the breath. The prana is the energy that moves through your body. So my own personal experience has been, I use the breath to help move the energy in my body.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. It's such an infinite world. We could talk about energy bodies. We could talk about all these things as you get subtler and subtler. But I think these are just great places to start. Yeah, with meditation and breath work, one interesting, I guess it's a parallel relationship. One interesting relationship is that meditation, in the type that I've practiced the most, is so much about observing the breath without changing it, without altering it, without judging it. Again, that equanimity, which means a radical acceptance and letting the breath breathe you in some ways. And, we got another cat coming in. We accept guests of all color, shape, fur color, size. We do not discriminate. Get on here. The main way I've meditated has been a practice of not changing anything as one way of cultivating equanimity. With the breath, you have this incredible tool, one of the few that can completely be autonomous, do its own thing. You can give up control and see that you still breathe. And you can immediately switch that and control it and take the deep breath or the shallow breath or do any type of practice and change the prana, the energy, how you feel in your body. I just think that relationship is so fascinating. There's so few things where you can have it be in both modes, autopilot or manual like this. And I think as an object of attention, that just makes it infinitely complex. So we'll keep picking your brain on the optimal relationship when you're back about Ayurveda, for sure.
It's all back, and Ayurveda really is about energy and like the seasons and the times of day. And people think about it as just doshas and all that stuff, but what I started to talk about with this deeper inner awareness is truly the foundation of Ayurveda. So what we're talking about today weaves together with that it really is just, maybe to finish that, is just finding a balance with your energy. And first of all, being aware of your energy that's in your body, whatever you want to call it, and then just finding ways. back to concentration, sensory clarity, and equanimity, that like, oh, if I have, the more I have awareness of that I can choose how to focus, and that I'm sensitive to what's around me. And then also saying, and equanimity doesn't necessarily mean just balance. I like that, like in resonating with you, it said this harmony, like just find ways to be more harmonious. In Sanskrit, they call it sattva. You're finding this sense of just harmony. I don't know a better word in English to use for it. If I could leave the listeners with something, it'd be that it's. I look at it like it's a fish that's in the water, and they're so surrounded by water they don't realize it. But you look at birds fly; you're moving the air, and we just don't see it because we're surrounded by it. It's just so common. But when you start to meditate, you start to see it more clearly, and then when you see it, then it becomes yours to. Again, the Bhagavad Gita, know your prana perfectly, is the essence for happiness.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you so much, Patrick. Thank you for being here. I'm definitely looking forward to episode 2, where we get into Ayurveda and the depths of it. And as with, a lot of these very deep subjects, like it takes time to get into them and fully, explore them. And so I feel we did a great job with meditation and breath work, and I really appreciate all of the insights and everything that you've shared, and definitely looking forward to episode 2. And also maybe we'll have some new updates and maybe some new information about your research and maybe some new things that you've discovered by then. And just a beautiful episode. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I love sharing with people who are also on the path, and the work you guys are doing is just amazing. So, the world needs more like you guys out there to just hear people and help bring them into a place that's right for themselves.
Thank you. And more people like you as well. Could you help people listening to this help find you, whether that's online or the offerings that you have here?
I don't really have a website or anything, but they can, if you put my email in the notes, I'm more than happy. I'm retired. I have time. This is my passion. I really like talking. You can tell this is what I enjoy, especially people that are on, if I can make a little time for someone and help them, then that's makes me happy. Back to the whole, what we talked about earlier,
Oh, fantastic. And are you teaching locally? Do you offer classes?
Yeah, I should mention that. Yeah, Angelica got me, connected with you because I know her because I teach at the Yoga Hive on Penn Avenue,
Wonderful.
Garfield. Mm-hmm. I teach there on Wednesday mornings and Monday nights usually. And I'm doing an Ayurveda workshop in 2 weeks there. So if people see it, they can come and hear it. You get the preview of what I'm going to talk to you about, hopefully, and on the 27th on 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There'll be an Ayurveda workshop.
That's fantastic. All right, Pittsburgh people, find Patrick. Go to the Yoga Hive. We will share the email of your email in the show notes. So it sounds like Patrick's there to answer questions, keep helping us learn. Thank you so much. It has been wonderful, and already looking forward to the next one. And I hope to see you in person before then.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. And until next time.
This has been the Do You Feel Heard podcast. If you're interested in resources that will help you move through conflict, you can go to doyoufeelheard.com, where we have tools for individuals and couples.